So we are going to continue reading here through the Psalms. This is Psalms number 13, chapter 13, whatever you want to call it. To the choir master, a psalm of David. This is titled, How Long, O Lord? How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul, and have sorrow in my heart all day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed over him, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. So my first observation here is that this prayer, the psalm, it seems to be a product of its time. And by that I mean the frequent mention of enemies. The specific sentence here, how long shall my enemy be exalted over me? This sort of constant war in the ancient world, I think, is easily given into this type of language. But I can't help but to think that in the place of that line, something else could be added, because it just seems as though that question is a bit of a selfish question. However, I do appreciate the longing here. It says, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? And so David feels abandoned by something. And it is within this searching within his soul, and he asks the very question, how long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day? I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. I think going through these questions is very constructive for any man to do. And I think for this reason, it makes this prayer, this song, useful. Because going into that sorrow, going into that emptiness, rather than patching it with some superficial medication, whether it be bodily or some endless number of noxious stimuli to numb the brain, whether it be social media or the more subtle forms of temptation, that which may be good in small doses, when it distracts the mind for long enough, it draws the attention away from where it should be. And I think it's evident here in the Psalms that David understands this. And he's asking, in this sort of state of desire and emptiness, when he is most susceptible to the pleasures of the body, that he appeals to the Lord. And by doing so, given his openness, his state of mind to temptation, however he may have gotten there in the first place, he is doing right by attempting to get out of it and to come to the Lord. And he asks just this of the Lord. He says, light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed over him, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. "14. The fool says, There is no God." To the choirmaster of David. The fool says in his heart, There is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. Have they no knowledge, all the evildoers, who eat up my people as they eat bread, and do not call upon the Lord? There they are great terror. They are in great terror, for God is the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice, let Israel be glad. So another one of these superficial psalms here, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is primarily because, as the title says, the fool says, there is no God. And so I would expect for a rich prayer, a rich song, to determine why the fool says that there is no God, and what makes him foolish thereby. But we don't really see that. He says, the fool in his heart says there is no God. And he goes straight away to they are corrupt. They are abominable deeds. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. And yet there is no reason here. And it leaves us wondering. And it can, I think, perhaps tempt us into a false faith. And this is why I dislike prayer such as these. Because there is an abandonment of reason in order to get to the divine. It's cheat. It's an elevation without the climb of stairs. Without putting in the work. And he goes straight into, the Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. And so he continues. And he continues, he said, God is righteous. And one day, again, the salvation for Israel will come to Zion. And so this fanciful thinking, in the absence of reason, I would go as far as to say that it is a sin. A strong critique of a sacred text. However, one could argue that the conception of the Lord should already be in the mind before one reads the psalm. I would also argue that although we have description, we have much illumination of the surround that surrounds the divine, we have yet, in any particular explicit detail, to ask the most uncomfortable questions. Of course, Job assists us in that, the plight of Israel in the historical texts gives us some idea of their failures and of what is right based on their experience. Of course, we have Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, which also assist us in understanding the way of God and the workings of God. But yet we remain blind to its particulars. And it is the great humility of the blind man to accept his blindness, rather than to exclaim that he can see when he does not. So let's continue here. Number 15. Who shall dwell on your holy hill? A Psalm of David. O Lord, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell on your holy hill? He who walks blamelessly and does what is right, and speaks truths in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue, and does no evil to his neighbor, nor takes up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt and does not change, who does not put out his money at interest, and does not take a bribe against the innocent. Who does these things shall never be moved. So this is a bit better here, the psalm. So we have the question, who shall sojourn or make the journey into the Lord's tent, into the Lord's home? This is a sort of heavenly abode. Who shall dwell on your holy hill? Again, a place of elevation, above the commonplace of man. He says, he who walks blamelessly does what is right, and speaks truth in his heart. And so what might this mean? For one to be blamed for something is to imply that one commits a wrong. Now, of course, the blame can be just or unjust, but in the true sense of one that is blameless, they will not have committed a wrong to be blamed. And so in that sense, they are in the right. They are righteous. And he speaks the truth that's in his heart. There are no false lies here. Again, it is vague. I will have to give it, again, some credit, because we are still in the darkness, wandering this around, yet to put our hands on the warmth of the divine. And so we have yet to understand what makes a man blameless. We have yet to understand what is right. We have yet to understand truth and what it means to speak from the heart. Of course, we understand that the heart is a place of intimacy, and that in your most inner self, if deception is to lie there, if it was to make its home within the heart, it would be self-destructive in the end. And so that's why we say from the heart, because it is less likely to be false. Who does not slander with his tongue, nor does no evil to his neighbor, nor takes up reproach against his friend. So again, what is evil? What is slander of the tongue? What might a reproach be against his friend? Many of these we can imagine examples But we need a system. We need a way. We need someone to show us the way. To demonstrate, to place limits on the subject in a righteous manner, so that we may understand what true righteousness is. And we have yet to know Christ in this section of the Bible. But from a man that goes from the beginning to the end of this text, this should undoubtedly be on his mind. Number 16. You will not abandon my soul. At Michtam of David. A Michtam of David. Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. As for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. The sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out, or take their names on my lips. The Lord is chosen. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. I bless the Lord, who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand the pleasures forevermore. So again, I would argue similar critiques here. It's not worth going into the particular details as we have with other psalms, but it remains in the greater context of a greater understanding of what God is. This is perfectly fine. But in the absence of it, just so far within the biblical corpus, it's superficial, and we need more if we are going to base our life upon this sort of doctrine. Chapter 17. In the shadow of your wings, a prayer of David. Hear a just cause, O Lord, attend to my cry. Give ear to my prayer from lips free of deceit. From your presence let my vindication come. Let your eyes behold the right. You have tried my heart, you have visited me by night. You have tested me, and you will find nothing. I have purposed that my mouth will not transgress. With regard to the works of man, by the word of your lips, I have avoided the ways of the violent. My steps have held fast in your paths. My feet have not slipped. I call upon you, for you will answer me, O God. Incline your ear to me. Hear my words. Wondrously show your steadfast love. O Savior, those who seek refuge from your adversaries at your right hand. Keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings from the wicked who do me violence, my deadly enemies who surround me. They close their hearts to pity. With their mouths they speak arrogantly. They have surrounded our steps. They set their eyes to cast us to the ground. He is like a lion eager to tear, as a young lion lurking in ambush. Arise, O Lord, confront him, subdue him. Deliver my soul from the wicked by your sword, from men by your hand, O Lord, from men of the world whose portion is in this life. He will fill their womb with treasure. They are satisfied with children, and they leave their abundance to their infants. As for me, I shall behold your face in righteousness. When I wake, I shall be satisfied with your likeness. So we see a little bit more here. Not much more, but the slow drip is fine. Everything all at once can be kind of intimidating and difficult to interpret. So what can we say here of this prayer by David? So first and foremost, as we have mentioned in other psalms, I guess you call them, prayers, songs, whatever, chapters, again, whatever, this focus of attention is particularly important, and it begins by saying, "Hear a just cause, O Lord, attend to my cry. Give ear to my prayer from lips free of deceit." And so he's saying that I'm coming to you in earnest. I'm appealing to God. Of course, again, our understanding based thus far, up until this point in the Bible, I have plenty of preconceived notions in my mind that come from different thinkers. It comes from C.S. Lewis. It comes from prior readings of Scripture. It comes from New Testament. But if we are just to dive into the Psalms, as they are in their place in this Bible, what is considered to be God and the Lord is still a mysterious thing in the mind of the reader. And so we have to be a bit careful. But I think I understand what he's appealing to the being of all beings. God is what he is. I am what I am, in other words. So he is truth. He is appealing to the truth. And of course we have the statement, I am what I am, up until this point. So we do understand this fundamental nature of the divine. Now everything, again, that springs off of that, like virtue and love and righteousness, again, these are tricky things. These are lofty words to just assume that we know the meaning of them, because they're not self-evident if we are novices, if we are to come to the Bible like children with no prior knowledge. But that being the case, I do like how David comes to the Lord and he says, I'm coming to you in earnest. He is asking of the divine to direct that attention to his honesty. And for truth to be directed to his honesty means that he wants to accept this divine gift that he's asking for. So at least we know that much. He says, let your eyes behold the right. And then he goes into this experience of his in his life. He's been tried. He's been visited. He feels he's been visited by the Lord. He's been tested. And yet, the judge of all judges will find nothing. And again, how do we know that? We really don't. At this point, at least. But of course, the human mind can imagine fanciful images. We can also imagine unfortunate realities in which we may find a man who is full of conviction and yet does not understand true righteousness or true love, or understand God as he can be, placed in his proper throne, on his proper throne. So again, I know this is ad nauseum, but until this window is closed, until we are satisfied, we have to continue to make these statements, because the possibility is open. And again, just because the possibility exists does not mean that it is in the nature of faith to accept something for which the implications of which are quite lofty and require you to abandon your reason to accept. And so we shall not do that. We shall remain diligent. We will be faithful to the truth and to the truth alone. We will not be deceived otherwise. And again, I'm not saying that we are now, but we need more. With regard to the works of man, by the word of your lips, I have avoided the ways of the violent. So, okay. So he's saying that he has some understanding of what the Lord wishes. And in this wishing, it has led him to avoid the ways of the violent. Okay, so again, another partial illumination of this surround in this dark room that we find ourselves in, stumbling over different surfaces, feeling about, trying to figure out exactly what object it is that we experience in front of us. So great, now we know. Away from violence. He says, his steps have held fast to your paths, and his feet have not slipped. He's been faithful. And he says, keep me as the apple of your eye. Now let's think about that statement. The apple of your eye. Now we can go into a horrific, gross exaggeration of what this statement, keep me as the apple of your eye, might mean. That could be correct, who knows, but it probably just means keep me as a matter of importance in your eye. View on me kindly. Let the attention of the divine find meaning when it gazes upon me. He says, hide me in the shadow of your wings from the wicked who do me violence, my deadly enemies who surround me. So again, similar rhetoric here. We have this conception of the divine being a shielding force against something that is evil. But of course, both sides have their enemies. Both sides can be wrong. One side can be right, another side can be wrong. So we can't really make much of a distinction here. We need context. We need to know what he means. Who are these enemies of David? Now, of course, we have information from the Old Testament about David's enemies, and we do understand that David as a king was a righteous king for the most part. He did have his pitfalls, just like every man. But to continue here, they close their hearts to pity. With their mouths they speak arrogantly. They have now surrounded your steps. They set their eyes to cast us to the ground. And so again, it's just this appeal to God, saying, hey, I've got the enemies around me. I've kept close to you, Lord. Please shield me from these people, the people who close their hearts to pity, and all the rest of it. And there's a statement here that I think is particularly useful to us. He says, arise, O Lord, confront him, subdue him, talking about his enemies. Deliver my soul from the wicked by your sword, from men by your hand, O Lord, from men of the world whose portion is in this life. And that statement there, from men of the world whose portion is in this life. And that's particularly interesting. It is insightful. And so what does it mean for a man to be of the world and have his portion in this life? I think it's fairly obvious. By this life, he means the this material life, this the here and now, the life in the sense of the individual, a particular type of the, well, not necessarily that, but the individual that is connected and has a preference to this moment here and now. And I think if we are to move away and move outside of that, what does it mean for mankind to have a portion in another life? Well, it is likely that it means that his portion assuming that he understands that his ego and the period in which he finds himself is not to be all for mankind, but rather it's just one step in this march of man towards a higher purpose. Within this saga, within this story, his commitment is to the best and to the uprightness and to the righteous path. And his deliverance, his portion, comes not with the particulars of the age or of the, sticking with the analogy of the march, of the particular minute detail that he adds to that march, whereas the man in this analogy symbolizes the collective moving forward in this direction to who knows where. And in the sense, he says, when this marching man finds his destination, when he finally sits himself down upon a comfortable chair to rest, these are the rewards that he is after. The rewards of mankind, not for the rewards of one man. And he says that his enemies are of the more individual sort. They care for the here and now. They care for the worldly affairs. So, to continue here, 18 is quite a long one, so forgive me for my terrible reading. The Lord is my rock and my fortress. And this is to the choir master, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who addressed the words of this song to the Lord on the same day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. The cords of death encompassed me, and torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of shield entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I cried for help. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundation also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils, and devouring fire from his mouth. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, thick clouds dark with water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through his clouds. The Lord also thundered in the heavens. and the Most High uttered his voice. Hailstones and coals of fire, and he sent out his arrows and scattered them. He flashed forth lightnings and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He sent from on high, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy, and from those who hated me. For they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a broad place. He rescued me, because he delighted in me. The Lord dealt with me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanliness of my hands he rewarded me. For I kept the ways of the Lord, and have not wickedly departed from him. For all his rules were before me, and his statutes I did not put away from me. I was blameless before him, and I kept myself from guilt. So the Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight. With the merciful you show yourself merciful. With the blameless man you show yourself blameless. With the purified you show yourself pure, and with the crooked you make yourself seem torturous. For you save a humble people, but the haughty eyes you bring down. For it is you who light my lamp. The Lord my God lightens my darkness, for by you I can run against the troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him. For who is God but the Lord? And who is a rock except our God? The God who equipped me with the strength and made my way blameless. He made my feet like the feet of a deer and set me secure on the heights. He trains my hands for war so that the arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand supported me, and your gentleness made me great. You gave me a wide place for my steps under me, and my feet did not slip. I pursued my enemies and overtook them, and did not turn back until they were consumed. I trust them, though, so that they were not able to rise. Let me restate that. I thrust them, though, so that they were not able to rise. They fell under my feet, for you equipped me with the strength for the battle. You made those who rise against me sink under me. You made my enemies turn their backs to me. And those who hated me, I destroyed. They cried for help, but there was none to save. They cried to the Lord, but he did not answer them. I beat them fine as dust before the wind. I cast them out like the mire of the streets. You delivered me from strife with the people. You made me the head of the nations. People whom I had not known served me. As soon as they heard of me, they obeyed me. Foreigners came cringing to me. Foreigners lost their heart and came trembling out of their fortresses. The Lord lives, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of my salvation. The God who gave me vengeance and subdued peoples under me, who rescued me from my enemies. Yes, you exalted me above those who rose against me. You delivered me from the man of violence. For this I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing your name. Great salvation he brings to this king, and shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David and his offspring forever. So, an interesting piece there. I have a couple of things to say here, both good and negative. So of course we see here a king that is fighting for his position of authority, in a sense. Though he does follow the Lord, he is engaged in war, and we have to remember that. There are a few things that we can say about this prayer. I do think it is interesting. I do think that we gain something from this. So I'd like to comment on when David says, "The cords of death encompassed me, the torrents of destruction assailed me, the cords of Sheol entangled me, the snares of death confronted me." And so, here we have a person who is engaged in this conflict in which his very life is threatened, his existence is threatened. And he continues and he says, "In my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I cried for help. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears." So, in a sense, this was a cry in earnest. Even in the face of death, David cries out to the Lord for help or for assistance. And I think when we are faced with the existential questions, this is the true test of the soul of man. I think this is the time when profound change can occur within the individual. Of course, it's not always a change that is beneficial to the individual. Certainly, there are no shortage of individuals in our society today that face these uncomfortable questions, and they turn to an outlet to dull their senses, to escape from the difficulty and the responsibility of answering them. Perhaps they may turn to drugs or alcohol or the various vices of the flesh. But here we see somebody who is engaged in a conflict, who believes what he is doing is right, and he appeals to the Lord in the face of death. He understands that he is about to, or rather that it is probable, or perhaps I should say possible, for him to face the absence of his individual self. We've discussed before this differentiation between the individual and the and the collective spirit, and how this relates to Sheol, this place of nothingness, this void, this place where the soul goes without memory of his individual existence. Perhaps I wouldn't say that it's quite damned, but it is an intermediate between the hell and the heavenly, certainly, the afterlife. And so again, to bring this point into conclusion, what I would say here is that David is a good example of somebody who is tested, truly tested, because it is their very life that they are fighting for. And in this fighting for his life, he remains faithful to the Lord. Again, the richness of the word Lord, of God, has yet to be sort of unpacked for us. But we do have this profound faith. And we must hope, at this point at least, that there is some real substance there. And I do believe that there is, as we move farther into these prophetic texts. Undoubtedly, we will unpack what this means. So then he goes on to say, again with this fanciful type language that I'm not the greatest fan of, but whatever. He goes on to say that the Lord has heard his cries, and then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils, and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. Now, that fanciful language aside, this next statement here, I think, is very interesting and also very useful. David goes on to say, he bowed the heavens and came down. So the Lord came down. So he descended from his high place, and he came down. Well, we know he came down. To the degree to which he came down, that is yet to be seen. Thick darkness was under his feet. So, this implication that everything beneath the Lord is this shrouded in darkness. As the divine light comes down into it, it permeates that darkness. Again, back to the human perception within our darkened room, not understanding what surrounds us, but we have no choice but to accept it because this is the world that we were thrown into. And it is our very existence that persuades us to discover what is in this room. And by doing so, we discover the divine nature. We discover what surrounds us. We discover the purpose and the meaning of life. And so, when I think about this, when I think about God descending into the more corporeal realm, it is a light, a divine light, into this darkness, into this different reality. And he continues, he rode on the cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him. The clouds, dark with water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through the clouds. So if we are to pause here for a moment, I would like to use the useful structure of interpreting symbolism as presented by Matthew Pageau in the Language of Creation, the Cosmic Symbolism of Genesis, where he talks explicitly about the symbolism of the cherubim. The cherubim is a being that is composed of a human face. It has attributes of an eagle, a lion, and a bull. And this symbol is meant to symbolize, on one hand, the utility of this being to carry the breath of God and bring it down into corporeal reality, or to the human level of perception. If we are to move into the analogy, because we can zoom out all the way, and we can say that, okay, God is on this cherubim. The cherubim itself is a chariot or a mount by which God descends down to our interpretable realm, that he may breathe the divine wisdom into us. But also we can view the cherubim itself as a symbol of human perception. That is, the eagle is this flying above, riding on the winds. Again, this sort of symbol of breathliness of this divine spirit that comes down through human perception. We are able to understand this and transmit it to our material reality as we raise the earth to better suit our needs. We can grow crops for our purposes. We can tame animals. We can build machines. All of these things, there are mechanisms, there are reasons why we push ourselves to do these. And when we consider a king that is fighting for his life, that's fighting for his position of authority, let's say, in a sense, he requires this divine wisdom to give him a reason to continue what he is doing in his life, so that he can maintain this position, so that he can continue to raise our human condition here in this corporeal, material reality, and more suit our needs. And of course, it's all directed towards or I should say, through utilizing the divine spirit to bring us into closer connection with the true divine, the Father. And so I just wanted to mention that there. And so, again, this image of God that is descending from the heavens, he uses the clouds as this covering. And then in an instant, the sort of the divine nature breaks through. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through his clouds. And so this is sort of a symbol, I think, of his divine judgment, of his sort of preference for David's rule over the instability that presents, or the wilderness that confronts him, the people who no longer believe, like in the previous Psalms. The fool says there is no God. How long, O Lord? The faithful have vanished. In you do I take refuge. Why do you hide yourself? All this sort of stuff, we can see it now building this surround. This, again, from the human perspective, the surround that surrounds the divine for which, again, from the human perspective, we cannot really grasp. We can only feel around our darkened environment and make out through our continual questioning and attentiveness to the questions that we ask, and attentiveness to the information that we gain as a result. And it's through this continual process that I think the Psalms are, in one sense, unfolding here, that will lead to some of the answers of some of my complaints earlier on about this, this fanciful language, about not really explaining quite profound words like righteousness, like the Lord, like God, like heaven, salvation. And so, to continue here, we have this vision of the Lord coming down to us, revealing to us this divine nature, or at least to David in this case, that saves him from certain death that surrounds him, the torrents of destruction that assail him, the cords of Sheol that entangle him, and the snares of death that confront him. And so we continue through the Lord's dealing with David's enemies. And then we have another interesting statement here. Interesting passage, I should say. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire, and he sent out his arrows and scattered them. He flashed forth lightnings and routed them. Then channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. And so this is an interesting symbol here, because what this means is that, at least what I think it means, is that the divine principle is revealing the very nature of reality. The foundations of the world were laid bare. Again, exactly how it has done this, we are uncertain at this point. However, we do know now, again, through this analogy of feeling around in this darkened room, we have discovered the object, a particular way of the divine, that it can reveal to human perception the very nature, the very foundations of reality. So we have continued symbolism here in Psalm 18. He sent from on high, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. And so what does this mean? So the water, of course, is a symbol of instability. We can think of it as a torrent of a destructive force, of in a sense, a force of destabilization, of potential renewal. But he drew me out of these waters. He drew me out of a place of darkness, out of a place of instability. He rescued me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me, for they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me into a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. And yet again we have another illumination of this surround of the divine, and that is in the verse 22. For all his rules were before me. So in verse 21 he says, for I have kept the ways of the Lord, and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his rules were before me, and his statutes I did not put away from me. And so, of course, these statutes, these rules, this is, I believe, a reference to Mosaic law, to the laws that are seen through the early books of the Old Testament, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. And so while these are foundational rules, and again, statutes, what we desire here is something greater principles for which we can understand where these laws came from, understand the seed that grew the tree, this stable entity that allows these laws and these statutes to work in our civilization, to work in human society. And he says, again, we've seen this pattern before, that he was blameless before the Lord, and as such, he was kept from guilt. And he was rewarded according to his righteousness, according to that blamelessness. And this is according to the cleanliness of his hands in his sight. Again, the sight of the Lord is something that we are going to continually unpack here. We get small hints, and perhaps this is the best way to do it. The Bible is giving us small hints through the Psalms, through the previous books of the Old Testament, through Job. We get a lot of it. And so the cleanliness of one's hands in the sight of the Lord, perhaps we don't quite know exactly what this means. We do know from following the laws what this might mean, but in order for a true way, for a true being to be in connection with the divine Spirit, or perhaps be carried by the divine Spirit into the divine nature, to more fully be in connection with the Father. That is yet to be revealed to us. Another thing of particular importance here is the symbol of the right hand. It says, "You have given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand supported me, and your gentleness made me great. You gave a wide place for my steps under me, and my feet did not slip." So this symbol of the right hand is associated with power, authority, and honor. Of course, it's also used to represent the presence of God. But by way of this authority, this power, this honor in the divine sense, the ultimate sense, it provides us the ultimate form of security. And so for David to say that the right hand of God has supported him and his gentleness has made him great, it is in this very way that we can see the symbolism of the right hand, that the right hand does represent authority, and it represents power, and it gives human beings security if we are able to find ourselves in a position to be supported by it. And so, again, sticking with this analogy of the dark room, in which we feel our way through the surround of the divine, this is an important piece of information here, the right hand of God. This authority, this power, this honor, this protection, if we are to find ourselves in the grace of it. And so with this, we will pause here. We will continue next time with Psalm 19, "The law of the Lord is perfect."